Welcome to Fat Chicks on Top. This podcast contains frank discussions about the body, sexuality, and occasionally uses swear words, which may not be appropriate for people under the age of 18. This podcast also uses facts, statistics, and mathematics, which may not be appropriate for liberal arts majors. And this podcast relies on science and reality, which may not be appropriate for evangelicals. Welcome to the show. This is Auntie Vice here with Fat Chicks on Top. Today we have a guest I've been wanting to get on the show for months and months and finally got an interview. Sinclair Sexsmith. You probably know them as the most famous butch, non-binary erotic author out there. They work with Sugar Butch. They're on Autostraddle. They teach. They edit Best Lesbian Erotica. They write. They were a Lambda Literary Award finalists. They do all the things. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So, because we've had other authors who have appeared in Best Lesbian Erotica, and they consider that one of their highest things they're excited about. For those of you who listened to the interview with Meg Elison, she said she brags about that more than any of her other awards, is that she was in Best Lesbian Erotica, and you are the editor. This is a relaunched series with you as an editor. So how did that come to be?
Cleus approached me. Cleus Press kind of emailed me a little bit out of the blue. I have been a guest editor for the Best Lesbian Erotic series in the past. The one that was published in 2012, I was the guest editor, and they used to kind of have a different style of series where they'd have a series editor and then a guest editor pick the story for that individual event, individual copy. And then I'd also done an anthology with them called Say Please, that was lesbian BDSM erotica around the same time, 2012. And I've reviewed books for them for a long time. So I knew my work was on their radar. We've talked, I've sent them things. I've occasionally gone by and, stopped by the office and had lunch with one of the editors or whatever. And so I think I was just on their radar when they were in the place where they were looking for a new editor of the series. This year, volume 7 coming out this year, is going to be 2023's book. It comes out in December, is the 4th in the series that I've done. I'd have to count, but I think it's close to 30 that they've done total. And I'm really excited about it. I love the new cover. I'm really excited about the stories. I've been actually just the last 2 days, I've been working on edits for that book. So it's very close to complete, and I'm really stoked to have that one out in the world soon.
It's interesting because your approach is to make it very inclusive in how we conceptualize lesbianism. And so it goes beyond just cis female stuff. What are the trends right now in erotic writing and BDSM writing that you're seeing?
What are the trends right now? I mean, Cleus knew when they were hiring me that my work is very gender expansive. And so it's definitely been a goal of mine to have significantly more trans women included and have non-binary folks who, I think the way I've been saying it is something like non-binary folks who are rooted in lesbian community and lesbian culture, because not all non-binary folks are, but many are. And to have those voices and opinions and representations included in a overarching lesbian collection. I've also talked to Cleus about, would you ever consider changing the title and moving the title to something new? And they I don't think not so much. They're not so into that idea. And in part, it's actually, goes into the like marketing issues of the book and the ways that keywords and titles make a big difference in sales and marketing. And so that's a realm that I'm less familiar with as far as traditional book publishing goes, a little bit, but not a lot. And so there's a way that I don't, as the editor, I don't have a lot of control there.
Yeah, there's a large discussion in the erotic community about how things get marketed, and do we need a unique section, say, for Black romance or Latinx romance? And is that just niche marketing? Should we incorporate it into the larger spectrum? And I think as society starts to deal with racism on different levels, it becomes more complex to navigate. Have you found other places to find, because your work is very expansive when it comes to gender and various BDSM activities and stuff. Have you found that to be fairly accepted amongst your readership, that people are really into this and it's just mainstream publishers haven't picked it up yet? Or is it really quite niche still?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to tell based on my readership, because my readership is opt-in, right? Like they come to me and they stick around because they like it. So the folks who are not into the kinds of dominance and submission, the sometimes like daddy dynamics within dominance as well, I imagine they don't read a lot of my work, because those are keystones of my erotic work. So, I hope like kind of, I don't know, good internet citizens or good internet etiquette would have, if people are stumbling on my site and going, this smut really isn't for me, that they just kind of go and they find somewhere else to be. And so I don't even really notice or see them. It's the folks who are there and stick around and read over and over and contact me and come to classes. And, those are the folks that I hear from. And those are often the people whose interests are very much more aligned. What I am seeing in erotica is a huge boom, especially in like queer kinky erotica, huge boom of self-published works. And lots of those are pretty kinky and pretty maybe even a little on the extreme side, and some of them are beautifully, incredibly written, and some of them are not well written at all, and some of them are incredibly compelling stories and characters, and some of them are not. And so it's amazing how much more representation and like this giant pile of works that we have access to, but then it's also a challenge to sort through them for like what's actually worth reading and what's not. But I think the quality, but I think the audience wants to explore power dynamics and explore intense sensation and explore all the ways that all the like complex things that BDSM has to offer. I think with the rise of ebooks, it's so much easier in some ways to read erotic stories, discreetly, and that has made a big difference in the industry. Just the other night I downloaded I have this habit, I don't know if you do this, but I have this habit where if I find out about a book, I'll go and I'll download the Kindle sample of it onto my Kindle. I have mixed relationships with Amazon, and I do my best to order books other places, from local bookshops or from indie stores online or whatever. But I've been shopping at bookshop.org a lot lately, which is great, right? They give kickbacks to local bookstores. I'll kind of bypass that by getting the Kindle samples. And then I say, if you get the sample and you actually read the sample, Sinclair, and then you still want to read the book, you could buy the book. This has changed my book purchasing habits significantly, because spoiler alert, almost never have time to read all of the samples that I download. And so I buy way fewer books this way. And then the ones when I actually do read through it, I'm like, oh, this one I do want to keep reading. And then I don't feel bad spending the whatever, 8, 10, 12, $14 on it. So just the other night, that's my backstory. Just the other night, I was like, I bet there's some really good lactation erotica and like, breastfeeding, nipple sucking erotica out there that I've never really dived into. I downloaded about 12 or so, maybe 15 erotica books, the ones that had good reviews and looked the best that I could find from Amazon, downloaded these samples, read through them all. They were terrible. I think there's maybe one that I would read a little more of, but I'm not sure I would pay for it. So I've been kind of like, I have not bit the dollar bullet for that one yet. So I love that I get to peek inside there, but like, then how do you find the ones that are good? Because I bet there are good ones out there, but no, there's no bookseller who has read this entire genre and curated the shelf with 10 titles as like, these are the right ones. So that bookseller job is so important. And that's, yet again, why I love the in-person bookstores. All right. I'm meandering through a tangent, so I'll go back to you.
No, it's funny you bring that up because that is lactation porn is one that can be hard to find decent writing. And I actually have a couple patrons who pay me to write custom lactation stories because they couldn't find what they wanted. So they hit me up and like once a month, I send them a custom lactation story and they pay me for it. And man, it's a different, it was not something I was ever into, but oh my God, they're fun to write. Like I love writing the sci-fi, weird, kinky shit. When it comes to your own writing, obviously you write stuff for publication and for specific projects and stuff, but what's the stuff you really love to write?
Well, I have been enjoying writing some lactation porn lately. For me, I think I do have a little bit of just a body fluid fetish in general. And so the fluids that come out of the body, just like, so it wasn't until, I don't know, well, probably more than a decade ago now, 10-ish years ago or so, but that I was like, oh, right, milk, like breast milk. What? Let's go there. What is that? Holy crap. But this is still something I feel a little private about, and I don't share about it a lot or write about it a lot. There are a few stories on Sugar Butch that are about this. There was one in particular by Maria C. in the archive that was one of the first stories that I read, and I was like, I get how that's sexy, right? Like, it just like clicked. I was like, oh shit, I think I'm into this. And I have a link I can send to you about with a pile of those. I put them all under like a particular tag now, so that they're all in one place. But that is one I've been really enjoying writing. I've been enjoying reading the genre of dark romance or dark erotica, which is relatively new to me. Like I hang out in full-on erotica and queer erotica and queer BDSM erotica most of the time as a reader. So like I was doing some research about different genres of romance and came into this dark romance thought and went, like, what is this? Tell me more. It turns out, it's a lot of, sometimes they call it dubious consent, where like maybe not quite consenting, but maybe it feels nice anyway, or sometimes there's like kidnapping stories where it's clearly not consented to. And, so there's this dark genre, has a lot of boundary pushing. And so I've read a couple things in here. Some of that has been amazing. And some of it has also been like, ooh, I don't know how you're going to redeem this. Like this is way outside the bounds of my ethics. And that's been fun. And I have been really wanting to write some of my own in that genre and push some boundaries around, like, I'm going to say ethics, but ethics are so variable. It's not quite the right word, but like consent and clarity. And, it's easy for erotica writers, especially ones who are also sex educators, to really have a lot of the like best practices woven into their erotica. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily make for the funnest stuff to read. So I've been really trying to figure out how I can push myself to write stuff that's riskier and edgier for me, and have some like sociopolitical justification around that, so that I don't have the pushback of like, you're encouraging people to do XYZ, right? How do we distinguish between this is pure fantasy and this is how you should do something if you are going to do a scene like this, which, those are different things. So how to keep those, like, how to keep the education separate on those.
I'm not sure if you've read Han's Daughter by Midori, but it's on that dark erotic. And when she talks about it, she's like, read all my other books and do what they say for kink. Don't do anything in this book. Like, this is purely fantasy set in the near future, but don't do anything like this, because this was all. And I know that she's worked with that herself. It's like, okay, so I'm doing all this education. This is how you do it right. But on the other hand, you may get off on some of this fantasy stuff because I think a lot of us who write have that struggle, like, or you'll be asked to write something. I've done a lot of ghostwriting that don't mesh with your ethics. How do you negotiate that? If you could get get the rent paid by writing something that doesn't fit in with full consent or something that you're okay with, but you also have to pay the rent. Where does that fall as a writer for you?
I don't do a lot of ghostwriting, and I don't like, I do paid writing for hire, but I don't know if I've really been asked to write something that I would say is out of my ethics. I mean, if it was a fantasy story, like say there was someone who said, my girlfriend really wants to be kidnapped and assaulted, and, 3 horrible people do whatever they want to her for a day or two or whatever. I want you to write this story for me. I could work that. I could work with that. That's without consent. That is outside the bounds of my ethics, but with consent and with fantasy, that's workable, right? If someone wanted me to write something about, like, I don't know, condoms aren't necessary and you shouldn't use them and whatever, right? Like that would be too far, and I would say no. But again, I'm not in that position very often. Most of the time when people are hiring me to write, I have a lot of creative control, and they might give me some frames, but I have a lot of control over the topics and subjects.
So on this, one of the things that has started to come up with some calls for erotic writing that I've seen, and it's rare, but it's starting to pop up, is more trauma-informed stuff, and around how you approach it, of writing fantasy that may be very triggering for folks. And you've done some work around, stuff that may trigger folks. How do you handle that in your own work?
In my own work, when I publish on sugarbush.net, which is like my main hub online where most of my stuff is, I just include content warnings at the top. I will include, this story includes daddy girl, force play, some resistance, some consensual non-consent, spanking, I don't know, whatever. The use of a insertable glass bottle, whatever. And I generally have found that people tend to be on the very positive side of content warnings, that they don't feel like, the story was spoiled, that they read the content warning and then just go like, ooh, yeah, this is definitely for me, and get even more kind of excited about it. And of course, if anybody was reading that and saw those things and was like, wow, I definitely can't read about that right now, then all the better. Great. Don't read about that. And that's been my major practice, is just including here, here's the content you're about to read, with some keywords basically. So I teach erotica writing I have an online group that's kind of on and off. It's a 6-week group called Writing Spicy. And I've done it 4 times now. And we're going to do another one in the fall of 2022. I don't have dates yet, but I'll hopefully have those soon. And in that writing group, we agree to a practice of content warnings as well. So we agree to put content warnings for these certain things. So there'll be a list of like if any of these things are in your story, just put a content warning. And I put it out to the group to ask, is there anything that you would need content warning for? And feel free to message me individually. If you don't want to out yourself about it, that's fine. And at some point, somebody said something like, oh, knives was one of them, right? Which I think was already on the list. But someone else said something that was kind of unusual. And now I'm trying to remember what it was. It might have been like hairbrushing or something,
Okay.
And because the thing about triggers is they're often really benign things, like for the ways that the brain latches on to like traumatic experiences. So like red sweatshirts, right? Like it's not always the kind of extreme that you think it is. And there are lots of people who are just not ready to read about that level of kind of violence or violation. I mean, I'm hesitating to use these words because I think within a consent and kink context, you could argue that is not the same thing. But there's a level of extremity of edge play that I want people to be able to opt into and to choose to read if they want to. And there's plenty of people in those groups who love reading the edge play and the dirty stuff. So it's not like the folks who do content warnings just like don't get any feedback or don't get read. Like the people are very excited about those things too. And that's worked pretty well, actually. Like having the warning and say like optional. If you're not in a space to read this, that's cool. And move on.
So you do offer the writing class. Full disclosure, I took the first one you offered and I thought it was fantastic and I got a ton out of it. Lots of people want to write erotica, or you may have written it for yourself or a partner. You throw it up on FetLife. What do you find when people finally come to a class, invest the time to develop it? Do most people go on then to write and get stuff published, or is this really just to improve your own writing and for fun? I mean, what for the students that you've had go through this class, kind of where do they go next?
It's so variable. Some people are just doing this because they have a personal interest in, private stories, maybe for themselves or for their partner, or, for writing better sex, like having better sexting or whatever. And there's I'd say that fewer people, but a small but mighty little cohort within the groups have been really dedicated to trying to send their work out to publications and getting published. Some of them have started Instagram accounts where they're sharing their writing, or blogs where they're sharing their writing. And it's been super lovely. I mean, I became the editor for Cleus Press for Best Lesbian Erotica 4 years ago. It would have been 99-ish. Is that right? 99. Sorry, 19. 18. Must have been 18. And the first year that I had a call for submissions out, and I got all these stories and I was reading through them, and I was just so disappointed because they just were not up to the caliber of like kinky, queer, gender weirdo adventuring that I witness and that I know happens in my communities constantly. And, like sometimes just being at a brunch party, you get better stories than I was getting submitted to this. And this is supposed to be like some of the best of the work of the year. And so I was like, all right, how do I support people who I know are writing amazing stories, who are having amazing adventures or amazing erotic imaginations, even if they're not kind of actualizing these at the moment? How do I support them to have more confidence to submit their work, because, if you've never submitted something before, if you didn't go to like writing school, which I did, and like learn the process of how to submit something, you're missing a bunch of steps, and you might just find it so intimidating that it's just not possible. So part of, especially the early few writing spices that I did, we spent some time talking specifically about how to submit something, how to read a call for submissions for a book, where to find the calls for submission, how to know if your piece is a fit or not, or could be a fit or not, and how to query the editor, how to actually write the email, like what do you need to say in it. So really trying to break down that process to make it more accessible and demystified for the people who, did not have those kind of educations, because it's a tool, it's a skill like anything else, and you can learn it and get better at it, and then it's a lot easier to submit. So really my secret agenda is to have more kinky queer people and more of the like marginalized, weirdos. And I say the weirdos with so much love in my heart, not in a bad way at all, but meaning the like, not the people outside of the mainstream, to feel like they have a right and a place to be in those conversations about like what is erotic to queer folks. Yeah. And that's been successful, somewhat successful. Definitely been lots of people from the classes who have sent stuff in to my anthologies, to Rachel Karma Bustle's work, because she has like a dozen anthologies every year or something. That's not true, I'm exaggerating, but it feels like that sometimes. She's so prolific.
She does so much. Yeah.
So much. And so she's always looking for new people to publish, and is a wonderful editor to work with, as far as like suggestions and feedback. So a variety of folks have been published from there and are still really dedicated. And then there's a variety who are like, wow, I haven't written at all since your class. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. That's it. Or like, I wrote my girlfriend an erotic story for Valentine's Day. Thanks for your help, and that was all I'm doing with it. So like, it's more about personal interest than about like professional growth. But I think if people want to take it onto that professional growth level, there's some possibilities there.
So for some people, writing erotic or writing in general is how we process our shit and process our trauma. Has that been true for you?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Writing and like kind of being a writer, quote unquote, is about the way I process the world and my life experiences. So I am compulsively writing. Like I have, just from our conversation in the last half an hour, I have half a page of things written in my notebook right now, because I'm just compulsively making notes and like kind of like processing my experience from my head, brain, mind down through into my hand. And that, something about the act of that makes my experiences integrate better and like makes me understand my own experiences better. And I love the genre of like transformative arts, transformative writing, as a way to dive in to explaining and sharing, even if it's sharing just like between you and your journal, right? About your life and about your experiences, such that you come to new understandings of them by the end of the writing. One of my writing teachers used to say, we write so that we can get to know what we don't know that we already know. Because there's nothing that's coming on the page that you don't somehow know somewhere in your body. But sometimes you have to really do some effort to tap into those things. Yeah. So I spend a lot of time journaling and writing and working with different forms of writing to support myself and my growth and my understanding of my trauma and my understanding of where I'm going next in my like healing or self-awareness journeys. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we could talk about that all day.
So in doing this type of writing and getting out, has it changed your sex life?
Oh, absolutely. And actually that's basically Sugar Butch's origin story, which maybe I'll tell, but I'll try to keep it brief, which was that I was living in New York City with my college girlfriend. We'd moved there together, and we stopped having sex. We had a whole like bed death situation. We were together 4 years. We had sex 4 times in the second 2 years, in the last 2 years of the relationship. And I counted because I was going just nuts with desire and want, and I thought she was so sexy. Like I wanted that play. And so I decided anytime also I felt like I had writer's block. I have different thoughts about writer's block in this moment, and that's an asterisk to come back to later, but I really wasn't writing at all, because everything I was writing was, I should break up with my girlfriend. I should break up with my girlfriend. I should break up. And I just wasn't ready to face that. So I basically was stopping writing. So I decided anytime I wanted to have sex, I would either go to the gym and try to like work it out of my body, or I would write erotica. And so of course I wrote a lot of erotica. I did not spend much time at the gym, maybe a little bit, but not a lot. And I did what I knew what to do with some writing that I kind of was liking, which was that I put it on an anonymous blog, and it was 2006. So like anonymous blogs were, in the blogging world, was quite different in 2006 than it is now. And started getting some, attention for it. I kind of became part of there was kind of a bit of a like sex blog community in New York at that time. And as soon as I started writing regularly, I had to really face the truth of my relationship and the ways that I was not getting what I wanted or needed, and that not having an active sex life, even though the rest of the relationship was really fantastic, was enough of a reason to not be in that anymore. And that was a process, so like that's just one example, but I have spent a lot of time writing myself into new identities and new senses of myself, new understandings of how I work in the world, or how I want things to work, depending on what I'm kind of trying to work out and what I'm trying to make sense of.
Has that been part of the process of coming into a non-binary identity, or was that separate for you?
I definitely did a ton of writing around non-binary identity and work, and like writing myself into that. I mean, I came out as butch more than 20 years ago. Let's see, it was 1999. So whatever that math is, 23 years. And through the, like, butch is still kind of my favorite word for my gender. But as like other kinds of, I don't know, sibling words, it was more like androgyny when I came out, and it was more that it was genderqueer for a while. And now we've kind of moved to non-binary as a whole. Like, those words still exist and people still use them to describe themselves. But as like a whole and a culture and a category, we've really latched on to non-binary in a different way. And so my words have kind of adapted as those words have evolved over the years too. And I use non-binary because I think it does communicate to people that I have critique of the gender binary. I occupy some spaces outside of it, and that I believe there's kind of more than two genders, and broadly, right? There's some broad things that non-binary people generally agree with and exist and believe. And there's some ways actually that my gender is actually pretty binary. Like, I am a masculine, butch, like kind of trans-masc-ish person. And that hasn't really changed in the 23-ish years since I came out as butch. And like my gender is not really fluid. I don't, I don't have much of a range of my presentation. Like, and and it's kind of pretty firm in the kind of traditional masculine look, you know. There are plenty of folks who like transition or come into a masculine identity and then are like, oh, now that I'm so masked, I can definitely wear lipstick and heels and feather boas or whatever. And like that kind of dress up of femininity from like a masculine perspective is like more fun for them. And that's just still not that fun. I mean, I can do it. It's just doesn't have a lot of heat in it for me. So in some ways, non-binary, I am kind of on the fence about. I'm into it as a social category, and I fit in there as better than I fit in most other categories. So like I use it, but there is a way that sometimes I'm like, but am I not binary though? Because I kind of am a little bit. That's a broad. So how did I use writing for that? I think most of my writing around non-binary identity has been in my journals as opposed to public. But I have written some about gender and sex and kink and being a daddy and being a dominant throughout the process as well, for sure. And, it took me a while to come to feel comfortable with being a dominant and a top and being masculine, because I just felt like, am I just reinforcing a stereotype here? Am I following along these assumptions about what things should be like? Is this really true for me? Am I perpetuating a stereotype? And had to really kind of, reconcile that as I was coming into both of those identities, because neither of those, being butch or being dominant, I was really, born with. They all came later, and they were processes to develop.
So you bring up butch. We've had a couple of other folks mention it, and it tends to be people who are a little older, over 40. I don't think of 40 as old, because I won't pass that point. But but it was for a long time. Butch was an identity, right? And butch was a very strong identity in the lesbian community and had a very strong meaning. So for you, when you came in and decided to kind of embrace the butch identity, some people think of it as just a style of dress or gender presentation. Was it just that for you, or was it is butch more than that for you?
Yeah, it's so funny because like when even just saying that it was an identity, like I think it really is an identity. It still is. I do see a lot of 20-somethings coming into using it and coming into a butch femme dynamic. And I mean, percentage wise, I don't know. I don't know how to gauge the like popularity, or if it's getting, many people think butch is dying. I actually don't agree, but that's a whole other cultural conversation. I do think it's present. I think it's still here. I also think, when I was coming into being a butch, and changing my appearance a lot in the late 90s, people said the same thing. But butch, that's only for old people. That's only for the old dykes. Like, nobody's butch anymore. We don't use that term. It's so outdated. It's so heteronormative. It's so, whatever. And I was kind of like, okay, I hear you. And like, there's something in this for me. And I didn't know at the time very clearly, I think, what it was, but it is about dress and style of dress. It is about, there's a particular kind of classic masculinity look often associated with butches, right? That has to do with like, even if like anything from like jeans and t-shirts to like suits and vests and dapper accessories, the like kind of dapperness. But there's a range, right? Because you kind of also have the like mechanic butch, or the like Wall Street butch. Like, these are wide range of kind of class expressions of it too. But the thing that was the most important to me, and the thing that I just couldn't shake, and that really kind of clicked, was the way that being butch put me into a lineage of other butches, and it put me into kind of a direct conversation with this line of butches who've come before me, known and unknown, plenty of very unknown folks who just lived their lives and did their thing. And then the variety of maybe what I would call like paperback mentors, people who I learned through their books about their lives and work, and, coming out into books like Leslie Feinberg and Bear Bergman and Ivan Coyote and, oh gosh, I'm sure I could think of many others, but those three come to mind immediately. It felt like the things I was writing and the philosophy I was pondering had a community and had a context, and that was what mattered to me the most about that. And that, like, the things they were describing, I was like, oh shit, that's me, right? Like, that I could finally see myself reflected in bits and pieces of their experiences in a way that I had never had before, as someone, who grew up a girl, a female, whatever I was, and just did not understand how I fit in the world because I didn't see people who looked like me or who looked like how I felt. So that was the revelation of the like paperback mentors, and putting myself in a lineage and in a conversation with the butchers who came before me was what was revolutionary, changed my world for sure.
Yeah, no, there's some amazing writing about it, and that stems long way back through queer writing and lesbian writing. And the butch is dying theme has been there since the 70s, at least in the writing that I've seen, right? And yeah, I think part of it is with gravitating towards non-binary is there's been such a pushback, and somehow butch is supposed to be unflattering or a dirty word. It's one of my favorite Instagram accounts is Butch is Not a Dirty Word, and it's just full of hot butches, which just make me, yeah, that's where my heart lies. And but not seeing yourself reflected in representations of the wider presentation of what female-bodied people could be, I think, is a big part of it for some folks, and we don't have that in the wider culture, right? We may have tomboys for a little bit, but it's supposed to be something you outgrow. The other part you bring up is the daddy. So let's talk a little bit about daddies and what is daddy in kink, and how does that manifest for you?
Sure, totally. And I think also, before we dive in too much, I guess I also want to say that, like, I think it's a little weird that the kink culture doesn't have more content warnings around daddy content, because there's a lot of trauma with folks who have life experiences with, boundary violations and issues with men in authority over them, and in particular father figures. And I think, anyway, so I just want to throw a little content warning onto it. And as I've been trying to be more cautious about about what I put into the world with daddy content on it. So you might notice if you go to sugarbutch.net that a lot of the stories that have daddy, or a lot of the erotica stories that are about daddy content, are under password protection now. And that's in part because I don't want people to just stumble into it, especially from a search engine, because there's that's some of the highest searches I get, and some of the highest search results I get are people coming across, the story Daddy in the Morning, and then they come from search engine, they read that story only, and they leave. And there's no greater context for who I am and how I approach daddying and what this means. And people can superimpose all sorts of things onto that story about whatever. And it was when I started getting comments of, like from someone with a male name, who knows who they really are, saying things like, I do this to my daughter every morning or whatever, which obviously I don't publish that comment on the site, but like, I don't even want to be anywhere close to that, enabling that kind of thing. And I feel like the thing I've had to do is put the things that are more controversial behind a password. And that doesn't feel great because I want accessibility of the work, and I just don't want it out of context. All right, that's all backstory to daddying also. And also, people get the password by joining my Patreon. And if someone is like, I can't, I won't join your Patreon for whatever reason, they can just write me and I will give them the password. I prefer people to donate when they can and have the capacity, because it feels like an energy exchange that way, right? Like, that I'm like, sure, you can have access to all this really intimate stuff. Like, maybe you could give me just a little something, $1 a month, whatever. But if people can't, and sometimes they can't, there's lots of reasons, that's okay. I do actually share the password sometimes. All right, that again is all the backstory. So daddy, it took me 2 or 3 years, I would say, from the time that I actually started reading and looking at some daddy erotica, and the time that I was like, okay, yes, I want this thing. Like, daddy erotica is common, right? Like, we see a lot of erotica, and even in the mainstream, we see it all the time. Who's your daddy? Or like, I don't know, Beyonce has a couple songs with daddy in it or whatever, right? There, we see it very commonly. And I think we know, just like we know if someone calls somebody else baby, that we're not literally calling them a small infant, under 2 or something. It's a pet name, and it happens to have the same letters, but it's used as kind of a different definition. And and while I agree with that and I'm into it, there's also kind of the ethical questions around it being the exact same word, and can you reclaim it? So I spent a couple good years going like, I don't understand. I don't understand this daddy thing. How is this not just incest? How is this not glorifying abuse? I don't get it. What's this about? And I would ask just anybody who would listen to me, like, what do you know about daddy in a kink context? What do you think about it? How do you justify it? And in retrospect, it's very clear that I was kind of trying to figure it out for myself, and, had a lot of heat there for me. I remember I had an art teacher once who told me, right, like, we're going to a museum, pay attention to the ones that you are really drawn to and you love. Pay attention also absolutely to the ones that you really don't like and what is in there for you. And so in some moments of like sitting down with my like 15th friend for coffee to be like, I just don't understand this daddy thing. Like, explain it to me again and again and again. And I have to go watch some more porn and read some more erotica with daddy in it so that I understand. Right. Like, I was kind of like, oh, there's something happening here for me.
Yeah.
And that line of sometimes like aversion and attraction can be kind of fuzzy for a little while. Like, do I actually hate this? What kind of heat is in there for me, and why? So at a certain point, I was like, kind of, I don't remember what the tipping point was, but I felt like I'd come to an understanding enough. And I think some of that for me has to do with seeing it in a lineage of gay Leathermen, and the ways that the paternalism and the like parental containment and guidance from older gay Leathermen toward younger gay Leathermen made a lot of sense, and was like this mentoring, erotic, sexy relationship that often included, outfits and other fun things, queer, SM, sex and stuff. So it took me a while. It took me a while to come to daddy as an identity. It took, then the girl that I was dating at the time, took her a while too. At first she was just like, fuck no, we're not, what? Like, I don't want to involve my dad in sex. And I'm kind of like, okay, it's clearly not your dad. Right. Like, and I thought she was going to be just totally not on board, like, ever. And then I remember at some point she said to me, I think I'm just going to like say it sometime, like when we're fucking or when we're, and we'll just see, like, I think I might just try, I might be kind of curious about it. And I was shocked because I did not think she was going to come around. And then when she did it, oh my God, I was out of my pants about that. Like, it just was, it was so sexy to me. And I think there was something really gender affirming in it for me. And there was something really power affirming of like, I see you as an authority. I see you as in charge. I see you as, and as protecting or caring or nurturing of me. And those are all definitely flavors and valuable pieces within my own dominance that I wanted to be visible. So I felt really seen, and it felt like a match. That felt like a very long answer, but there's a lot. There's so much to unpack in it. There's so much to unpack.
There is. I can remember the first time I read Doing It for Daddy by Pat Califfa. That made me extremely uncomfortable, but I have the book and I've read it over and over. Like, there's something, there's definitely something there for some people. And it's like, okay, I think you're right. It does start for a lot of folks as, okay, so this is really uncomfortable because it's the same language. And I think we have a lot of that in kink, especially if you're talking about middle or little play. Pet play can be weird for some people, but as you come into it, when it finally resonates, then it really resonates.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. If our readers want to find you, if they want to read your stuff, if they want to take your classes, plug all the things.
Yeah. So right now, which unfortunately the listeners are too late for, but maybe in the future, I am currently running a course online called DS Playground that is experiments for DS, and just, go and try out this bondage thing, try out this thing around service, try it, and then come back and report. And there's all sorts of things to write and read and play with. And interact with, and then you can draw your own conclusions about what you like and what you don't like, and the idea is so that you can better articulate your desires in DS coming out of this course.
And you run that fairly regularly.
I've done it about once a year since about 2014 actually. So we've been almost going on 10 years of DS Playground, and it changes every time, and there's, it's different based on different cohorts. And anyway, I love it. I just love the depth of conversation that we have in there. And it's such a queer and trans and non-binary focused space. Cis hetero folks can come too, but they're definitely in the minority, and that feels lovely. I could sit around and talk about DS all day. And so it's really pleasurable to do that for like 6 or 8 weeks during these courses. Upcoming after DS Playground, further this fall, I am going to be doing another writing spicy class, which is the erotica writing group. And it's 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I can't remember how long. And very fun to write together and to give feedback and get feedback. Very supportive environment. Again, lots of queer and trans and non-binary folks, and some of which want to get published and some of which don't ever want to do that, and they're just writing for funsies. So that, I'm really looking forward to that too. After that, Best Lesbian Erotica of the Year, Volume 7 comes out in December. So keep an eye for that. I think you've done reviews and stuff in the past.
Yeah,
Auntie Vice. So
I reviewed the last one. Yeah.
Awesome. Hopefully we can get you another copy and see what you think about it. And those are the biggest things. I'm still writing on sugarbutch.net. I'm in 2022. I've done an interview series called the Dom Sessions, where I'm interviewing other dominants once a month. Partly the purpose is because I kind of need some support for my own dominance. So I want to ask them things like, how do you keep in your dominant headspace when things are really hard or your mental health is falling apart? Because these are the answers I need to know. And that's been a wonderful, fun series too. That's mostly through my Patreon. Those are the big projects right now.
Yep. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been wonderful to have you.
It's so lovely to chat with you. Nice to connect a little bit. Thanks for having me.
And now, a moment of gratitude.
I'm currently grateful for, well, the last few months, my partner and I have spent a great deal of time setting up, converting a small like prefab shed that came from, it didn't actually come from Home Depot, but it looks like those ones in the Home Depot parking lot from a local company here. And then we finished it. We put insulation and walls. We finished the floors. We put some, and it has windows and skylights. And this is my office. And it is now my, my like room of their own kind of space. And I have not had my own room dedicated to my work in maybe ever in my adult life. I've very rarely had my own room in my own office. I've had like a bedroom, but like an office, a workroom. So I'm so grateful for all the work my partner and other friends put into setting this up for me. And it just feels so wonderful to like be in here and be surrounded by my cluttered crap that I love that sparks joy, every single piece of it. And yeah, that's one thing. I'm grateful it's the summer and it feels high summer. I'm in outside of Seattle in like Snoqualmie, Duwamish Coast Salish land, and the leaves are just bursting. Everything is super green and sunny, and I want to go jump in a river really, but I'm grateful for the high summer. Those are two things. The office, the summer. What else? I'll say I'm grateful for I have two actually different groups right now that are dominant, small dominant discussion groups. And I thought one of them would die for sure. And so I may as well join both. And then they're still going like almost 2 years later. And I'm really grateful for dominant peers and community who, occasionally have like called me on my shit and been like, nope, you're definitely being a dick about that. And then occasionally just been really, really supportive and open toward some of the hard times that have been happening. Because I don't know about you, but DS relationships, most of the people I know who have been in DS relationships through COVID times, it has been really rough to manage a power dynamic, in addition to everything else. So my heart goes out to everyone who's working on that. And I'm so grateful to my little peer support groups who have been really helpful.
Hi, this is Auntie Vice from Fat Chicks on Top. October is just around the corner, and that's International Kink Month. In preparation for that, I'm offering some special discounts. If you go to my shop at auntivice.com/shop, you can pick up a second edition of Love Letters to a Unicorn for $5 off using the code PREP4FOLSOME. If you are interested in kink coaching, by me personally, you can try a free session. You can book a session for coaching and use the code MyFirstTime, and that'll get you a free 50-minute consult.
Texas of the world.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fat Chicks on Top. Please like, subscribe, and review our podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on. If we like your review, we may even read it online. This has been an Auntie Vice production. Producer and host, Rebecca Blanton. Audio production by Sharon Smith. Music by David Manga. And more music by Sharon Smith. For more information about Fat Chicks on Top, please visit our website for all things Fat Chicks at fatchicksontop.com.